Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Open for Business Mentorship series, where the City of Charlotte brings critical information to our small businesses. I'm Tracy Dodson, the Assistant City Manager of Economic Development. I also have Jason Snyder, our Director of Corporate Communications, here with us today. And we also welcome you, our 5 panelists that are joining us as innovators in Charlotte's digital marketing space. Thank you for being with us today. They will share best practices about pivoting small business during this time and using digital platforms to amplify messages. Quickly before I introduce them, I also want to let our audience know about the city's small business flagship offering. The Open for Business Dashboard. A small business operating in a city are encouraged to go to the small business webpage on charlottenc.gov to apply to have their information both during the pandemic and after into the recovery phase listed on this interactive online portal. So everybody tune into that. And with that, I'm going to have Jason introduce our panelists.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to the panelists who have joined us and everyone who is tuning in. We've got Corri Smith, who's the owner of Black Wednesday, a creative marketing and PR company that focuses on grassroots efforts. She also collaborated to create Support Local or Else, which is a website supporting local small business. Carrie Barker is the co-founder of Girl Tribe, a women empowerment brand that has its flagship store in historic South End. She's also the creative director of Girl Tribe Creative, a graphic design company that covers various lifestyle industries, weddings, fashion, food, health, beverage, and more. Scott Gerbereux is the digital content strategist for Boone, Oakley, a local creative agency that covers both traditional and non-traditional sides of branding and marketing. And Jason Whitner is the owner of Social Status, a lifestyle brand and sneaker boutique that has always utilized digital platforms to promote their business, but has certainly pivoted during this time to host their own webinar series to help inspire their following. And finally, we're joined by Patrick Villafane, who is the owner of the Hop Shop Craft Beer and Wine and the Bohemian Wine Bar. His establishments have had a heavy focus on social media to communicate to their customer base during the pandemic, have created a new digital outreach strategy for them, including virtual wine tasting. So appreciate all of you guys joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Jason. We'll operate this as the first half. We'll allow the panelists an opportunity to talk. And then on the end of our discussion, we'll open it up for some questions from viewers. If you're watching on one of the CLT Gov social channels, you can ask your questions by using the comment feature. If you're watching from the government channel, please email your questions to Charlotte Support Small Business at charlottenc.gov. And with that, I'm going to go to Corri Smith. Black Wednesday focuses on helping your clients connect to the community. How would you help a small business transition during this time? And what's the message they should send to their customers?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. First off, happy to be here. So at Black Wednesday, we offer a variety of different services, but I would say right now the main service that we're offering is consulting. So offering advice and guidance toward creating brand messaging that is supportive to their current offerings and how things are updated at their business. So we work with a lot of food and beverage brands. They need to keep their websites up to date. They need to keep all of their social media channels up to date. And they need to also create interesting and engaging programming across their marketing platforms. So whether that's offline or online, through which after they create that programming, they can promote it across their channels. You know, the takeaways that we're encouraging brands to leverage is to stay positive, to have really clear and updated information and messaging, and to be super sensitive to the experience that not only we as individuals are experiencing, but brands as well and as a community. And then, of course, you know, we're also helping them with communicating with the media. So PR is a service that we offer for brands. And, you know, once they have their message and they have their campaign or they have their programming, we're communicating that with the media so that way we can get their message to a broader audience in addition to their own.
Great.
Next, we're going to go to Carrie. Carrie, Girl Tribes always use social media to promote your business. Now you've transitioned into having some live pop-up sales and have pivoted your in-store model to be completely online. What's been some of the biggest successes? What have been some of the challenges? Have you been surprised by how your customers have responded? Is there anything that you kind of thought would happen that hasn't happened, or vice versa? Kind of what's been your experience so far?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me on. Excited to be here and kind of talk about how we've pivoted. So I think our main goal, even over the past years, has been to grow our online, and this kind of gave us an opportunity to do that. I think number one is you're eliminating that in-customer experience, like whether it's pop-up vendor to customer or our in-store experience to customer. And so how can you create that customer experience across your social platforms? And so I think we've kind of doubled down in our content strategy, and we're just cranking out so much content, and we've seen the conversion for that. So online sales before this, I would say, was probably 80 to 90% of like direct online purchases, but right now we're seeing about a 50% conversion on social. So we've seen that kind of like dramatic turn, and we were definitely worried to see a downward slope in sales when it comes to kind of the potential of, if a customer comes in, instead of buying one thing, they typically will buy 2.5 things like over their lifetime. So how can we convert that online? And so what we're looking at is, if they're looking for an item, what's that other upsell item, and how can we enable them to find that item as quickly as possible, but also have the opportunity for them to shop more instead of just like a single item purchase, which also I think is a huge difference from in-store experience to online. And we've been pretty successful, like in the beginning. I think it's just getting the messaging out there, being authentic as we can, that everything's online, and like that's how you're going to support us. And I think any small business, again, just like bringing that message across and being really clear that like, please still shop with us.
Great. I'm going to go now to Scott Gerbereux and with Boone Oakley. Boone Oakley has worked with many companies, big and small, on their digital strategy. What have been the biggest concerns that you've heard from Charlotte small businesses?
Thanks, Tracy, and thank you for having me. A major concern for many businesses impacted by the pandemic is loss of revenue. As Carrie mentioned, clients are worried about a decline in foot traffic. So due to this lost revenue, many businesses are simply not able to invest in digital advertising. Completely cutting off your ads, though, is not advisable. If you're able to instead scale down your budget rather than cut it off completely, you won't lose optimizations that your campaigns have built over time. So my recommendation has been to either lower budgets or pause non-essential campaigns for certain industries, and then to focus the ad spend on branded terms due to their higher quality traffic they naturally receive. Also, with people spending so much time online these days, cost per impression for ads are really low. So getting into those is really easier than it has been. And many businesses are taking their foot off the gas of advertising, which means there's an opportunity for businesses that can invest in online marketing to gain a competitive advantage in the months to come. Since many small businesses could benefit from a boost in their advertising budget, I wanted to mention some resources that are available. The social media and digital marketing companies that earn a significant amount of revenue from small businesses are now returning the favor. For instance, Facebook just announced that it'll offer $100 million in cash grants and ad credits to up to 30,000 small businesses. In addition to grants and free advertising, Facebook is providing virtual training through its Business Resource Hub to help small businesses manage their operations more. Google launched a program that includes $340 million in credits for ads that can be used in 2020 on any of their advertising platforms. And Yelp recently announced $25 million in relief for restaurants and nightclub businesses, as well as free advertising through June. So these are just some of the programs that we're encouraging small business owners to take advantage of during this time.
Great, thank you.
That's great. It's really great information. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to jump over to James. James, social status. You guys have always really tried to use your brand to inspire others to follow their aspirations. What are some of the tactics you guys have used that have gotten the biggest response? Have you guys had to change your messaging? How have you had to pivot a very successful approach during this time?
Thanks, guys, for having me. For us, it's really just been about not pulling back on our messages. On our message, if anything, we've been doubling down on it. With brick and mortar retail going away, for us, it's always been about driving home our experience for the local communities that we invest in, not just in Charlotte, but everywhere where we're situated around the globe. So we took it as an opportunity to really focus on, really take the time to focus on talking to our local community and doubling down on doing it through digital. So really, it's just been about pushing our local strategy that we used to have in person into a digital format, and figuring out ways that we can support everybody as much as we can through the pandemic, at least through inspiring them with information and helping them through providing educational information.
Thanks.
Great. And then we'll go next to Patrick. Your team has been using social media heavily over the past couple of weeks. What has been the most effective way of communicating your new hours, special offers, and service delivery options through the pandemic?
Thanks, Tracy. The biggest thing to remember that we've been focused on is to have visibility and availability. People need to know that you still exist, that you're still out there, that you're still open for business. And so we've had a larger emphasis on posting daily, and then also on posting at certain strategic times. With pretty much everybody being at home these days, people are on their phones all day long. But we can still be strategic with, for instance, if we want to post about a lunch special, we can make that at a certain time in the morning, call it 11 or something like that. So when people are thinking about what they're going to have, they might see us while they're scrolling through their feed. And if we want to do a dinner special, we can do it at the same time, or we can do it a little bit later in the day, maybe 5, 6 o'clock, when people are starting to think about dinner. We've really taken advantage of stories as well, especially with our wine-related posts, whether we're doing different discounts on specific bottles of wine or wine tastings or anything like that we want to talk about. And then you guys mentioned earlier virtual wine tastings. People love the education aspect of learning about wine, learning about beer, and all that. And that's something that we've been able to give to them pre-COVID, and through these virtual wine tastings that we've brought in, we can continue to do it. So we've rolled out basically every 2 weeks, we're doing virtual wine tastings where we'll get together with a few bottles of wine. We'll sell these bottles to people that are interested in coming by and participating virtually. And then we'll host the tasting. And it's been a great educational way to do socially distanced wine tasting. Other parts are that it's a social. The service industry is a social world, so people want to stay connected with the people that they know and love from their various restaurants and bars. So we've put an emphasis on staff interaction, on posting bios about our staff, posting staff pics of the week or whatever. So people can kind of get to know us a little bit, and that plays also into the educational aspect, because if we're recommending a bottle of wine, we're going to tell you all about it as well. We also have a wine club that we've been continuing, and that's another educational aspect, and it's also a way to play in with our virtual wine tastings that are exclusive for those members. So the biggest thing being just kind of staying visible, staying available, letting people know that you exist.
I love the virtual wine tasting concept. So I got really quick a question for, I think, Corri and Scott, but anybody jump in. As you're consulting with these clients and people who are trying to pivot, this time that we're in is so incredibly fluid. How are you guiding clients through this pivot and setting expectations on how quickly they can pivot? I think Jason and I talk here at the office. It seems to be a different thing each day. So how are you guiding them through just the fluid nature of what we're in?
Can any of us jump in?
Anybody? Yeah, that's fine.
I guess for us, it's just understanding that I was around for 2008, and the one thing that I remember then was you just don't know what you don't know, right? And it's okay not knowing, and take the time to just listen, try to understand what issues arise and deal with them as they come. And I think because this is very different than 2008, because this is, I think, a pandemic versus an economic recession, which this pandemic did lead to economic recession. But I think if people just understand how they can navigate, how they can push their business forward, or potentially to digital, or just get more savvy with how they're doing their advertising, like one of the guys mentioned earlier, I think that's key.
Yeah, I think what James said and what Corri said earlier about being sensitive, to what's going on out there. There's really two messages that businesses can communicate right now to build lasting impressions on consumers right now. It's either doing good or making people feel good, relating to their lives. And a good rule of thumb that I have for them is to ask, is this going to help my customers right now? And in terms of pivoting, you shouldn't rush to put out that message because it might be out of touch. So it's really taking the time to develop, what you think the campaign is going to be around that, and making sure it's really in line with what people are needing, and not just rushing to have something out there because you want to.
We got a great question from one of our online viewers, and I'll toss that to anybody, but maybe Corri or Carrie, if you guys want to start with this, we can kind of see who has comments on it. So a lot of small businesses maybe had focused more on word of mouth or being from location based. What would your advice be for a small business owner who has not been online before? How should they even begin? What's kind of like the baby steps, the kind of digital marketing 101 for a small business that really hasn't focused on this before? So we start with Corri, and then we'll go to Carrie. Corri? Did we lose Corri?
There we go.
I think Corey's audio isn't working.
Oh.
She said she's having some.
All right, we'll start with Carrie then.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I think going with what Scott said, right now there's a time across Facebook and across Instagram where there's so many eyes on social right now, like the most there has ever been. People are at home, they're wanting information and they're trying to gather it, but they're also wanting a distraction. So I think leading with hopefulness and just like really inspirational content would be the way to go. But I also think there's, especially someone just starting, they're going to want it to be perfect. But right now, I think, you have to be sensitive to the messaging, but my opinion is to just get it out there. It doesn't have to be 1,000,000% perfect. People are consuming so much content. Like, I think you could just put whatever you're trying to sell out there or whatever service you have and get it in front of your customer to see the feedback. And I think people are really looking for interactive content. So I think if you're launching a product or you're just starting to move things over from in-store experience, you could really see what your customers are into, launch different polls or ask them questions, get your customer engaged and try and figure out some market research while you're in the social space.
Related, I know, Patrick, I'm going to toss this one to you because you recently launched the Bohemian less than a year ago. Maybe talk a little bit about how, along the same lines, how you developed your social strategy, your digital strategy when you were working on launching the Bohemian.
So At the Hop Shop, which is a craft beer and wine, but mostly craft beer establishment, we knew over there that our target demo was going to be mostly men, and it is. And the statistics back that up, the data backs that up. And with the Bohemian, kind of had a feeling that it might be a little more targeted towards women. And it's overwhelmingly women, actually. It's 82% according to our metrics on our Instagram and our Facebook tracking. So we kind of wanted to make an emphasis on obviously targeting towards the entire demographic of Plaza Midwood and our target area, but during having more of an emphasis on looking at and brainstorming what we thought might be more geared towards women. So obviously girls' nights out and those kind of things are always big. Any kind of, we put a bigger emphasis on making our photography, like scaling that up a little bit and making the pictures nicer and everything else. Different wine events that's centered around, it's very cliche, but like rosé all day and stuff like that, because it really spoke a little bit more to our target demo than, hey, come in and, we have IPAs too. So so starting there and really thinking about what our women-based demographic would want to look at, what would jump out at them, what they would see if they're scrolling through their Instagram feed and they're looking at hundreds of different pictures, what's going to pop out to them and what's going to remind them, oh yeah, there's a new wine bar in town and I want to go check it out. That would probably be the biggest focus that we had initially. And since then, we're obviously targeting to everybody, but we're still maintaining that message. But while, as I explained earlier, adding a couple new things that have been, pandemic specific.
We go to Corri.
Oh, is Corri back on? Corri, are you back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. A specific question
Sorry.
I have a very specific question for you that ask you. What large brands should people that you look to as inspiration on social and digital, if people are out there kind of looking for ideas? Any large brands that you think are really doing well right now? Corri, did we lose you again? All right, I'll save this one for when we get Corri's back. You can answer an email.
Yeah. So let me ask one really quickly. Out of all the platforms, the social media platforms, which would you recommend for a restaurant to focus on? Any suggestions?
We have Amamier Eats outside of Charlotte. It's in Houston. It's a restaurant concept in one of our retail boutiques, and we still like to focus on Instagram primarily because it's heavy photocentric, and you can get your message across and images across to the food, and it gives you the ability to communicate and push people over to our web.
Great. So I have another one that's in the same vein. This one says, I'm a small florist shop. Should I focus more on updating my social channels or my website?
This is James again. And I would say both, because one pushes to the other. Your social channels can lead to this. Your social channel starts the relationship, but the website keeps it. So I would start with social and then quickly pivot to web.
And I could jump in there too to play off what James said. Especially if you have an online ordering presence, obviously the website's going to be paramount compared to anything social. So if this person who wrote the question is planning on setting up the ability to ship flowers or something like that to somebody, then the website would be number one, but you get them there through your social channels.
Great.
Yeah, one thing not to forget is also your My Google Business hours. If you've adjusted your hours or offering different services, when they look you up online, make sure that information is up to date as well.
Let me stick really quick with everybody just to kind of round this out. What's a good budget for a retail store or a restaurant over the next few months as it relates to advertising and getting the word out?
I
for us, I think it's all about internalizing the process. I think right now there's going to be a huge drag on everybody's cash flow. So that's, if I'm an owner, that's one of the things, if I haven't been comfortable with, I would get comfortable with for at least the next 6 months, so you can keep the budget down. Obviously, there's a part of it that's photography based from a social perspective, but getting one of the key people on your team who has other skills to also be able to pick up digital and web, I think is important in times like this, because if not, then a campaign can cost exponentially more than what it would if you're actually doing it yourself or have someone on your team executing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you need to be looking at your bottom line right now, but I also think, being resourceful as possible. So if you're just starting out, but you have a girlfriend that does graphics, like I would think about how you could potentially trade services right now or rely on friends and family, just doing it as savvy as possible. But I also would agree with Scott that right now there's a ton of eyes on ads, and it's a low spend. Ads can run up really, really quickly, so you need to be smart about it. But I think even if you had a really basic retargeting ad or something like that, because I'm assuming you're pushing everyone to online instead of wherever else you were pushing them. So you want to be capturing that that customer again, if you can, especially if it's a low ad spend. So I think doing it as cheaply as possible, even if it's not the perfect picture. I think right now users are really liking organic content that doesn't look perfect. They seem to be responding to that pretty well. So I think doing a mix of things where you're doing it as cheaply as possible, I completely agree.
And then
Yeah, we've spent a lot with. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've seen a lot of success, like Carrie just mentioned, with retargeting. It's the old adage, it's a lot cheaper to keep an existing customer than to try and find a new one. So, really using your ads to engage with people that are already following your brand and visiting your website really helps keep your ad spend lower than trying to find new people.
And to echo what I was going to say after Carrie, I think the most important thing in working with your own team, and to her point about her point earlier about just getting your product and your brand out there, I think the most important thing to think about when you're doing so is just making sure you stay on brand and stay on message. I think it's organic, and being authentic is very important to her point, but just make sure you understand what your brand means to the consumer, who you are. And if you're too new to have established that, be mindful that you need to.
I think I see Corri back with us, so we'll try this one more time. Kind of a couple questions coming in around voice and identity, and the importance of how to build a brand voice or an identity for your company. Can you talk a little bit about some advice for small businesses who maybe are just now really starting to get in the digital social space on the importance of developing their own identity and voice, and kind of how they can go about doing some of that?
Yeah, let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yay. So I would say, really putting in some time, putting in the work to figure out, it's more than just saying, come visit us, right? It's figuring out, what are your words? How are you choosing how you define an invitation for people to invite them? And so for Black Wednesday specifically, that's an easy one, is to say, something mysterious or something a little clickbaity, or to say something that's a little witchy. But that takes time to be really thoughtful about your tone and the overall personality of what Black Wednesday is, or what your brand is. And so really sitting down and taking the time to figure out, what personality does our brand have, and how do you personify that through everything that you post on social? Or, how do you write that tweet? Like every morning CLT Gov tweets good morning and people love it, and that's now something that people expect on the daily. In fact, when Black Wednesday tweets that on Wednesday, we get in trouble because we stole it from CLT Gov. So anyway, It's being really thoughtful, and my team hates when I use that word, but it's digging in and being really thoughtful about how you say things and what your graphics look like and what your voice is and how you build that relationship. Because at the end of the day, when you're on social, the people who follow you, they just want to be your friend, you know? So how do you make it very colloquial and very approachable in order to sort of solidify that bond, which down the road will turn into dollars?
So I've got another one. I really like how Girl Tribe has implemented live sales on Facebook. What are some tips for someone getting started?
Yeah, we kind of just dipped our toes into that like a week before things started kind of closing down, which was really interesting to us. What we did is we did a ton of market research. So, we went on Facebook and just started looking up every single boutique that had their own Facebook group. Each one runs it completely different. All of them are using different kind of platforms to invoice and stuff like that. So really, I would say like first step is just to start Googling and seeing what other people are doing and what seems to be working for them, and then starting to test it out on your demographic and see what they really respond to. Of course, staying on brand, of course, staying with your voice, but again, kind of just a little trial and error. And it's really cool what happens in a Facebook group with social selling. You get direct feedback immediately. You have a really captive audience. Right now, Facebook is pushing groups. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but if you're scrolling through Facebook, groups are like getting hit pretty hard. So from a retail's perspective, getting into groups is the time, like for sure right now. You're going to be able to really engage with your customer the best comparatively to like really any other platform.
Great. Anybody else on just getting new followers into Instagram or Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, I think a really easy way to do that is to lead contests on Instagram. So as long as you follow the terms and the copy that you need to include on those posts, and if you set them up properly, you can really get some new eyeballs on your page. And most of the time, the requirement is that new people who want to enter the contest have to follow you. So I would say contest is a good way of getting new followers. Also, utilizing Instagram stories. There's lots of tools and stickers inside of there. There's geotags, there's hashtags. Instagram during this pandemic has created some different stickers that will allow you to get even more traction. So there's the stay at home sticker. There's a thank you healthcare hero stickers. There's a happy hour thing. There's the food delivery. So when you use those tools that they create for you, they sort of push your content in front of other people. So I think those are a couple good ways.
Great.
And what I've been seeing that Patrick mentioned earlier, I think live videos are being really popular, and even old-fashioned word of mouth helps spread those. But if there's restaurants, chefs offering cooking demonstrations or virtual wine tastings, I think that'll encourage followers to then be able to tune in and watch your content live.
And for us, what I think has been helping us during the pandemic, and this is James again, is just doubling down on our brand voice and our messaging and what we want to mean to our local communities outside of just selling things. How else can we pique their interest, and how else can we help them get through this process? And in doing that, they're always going to come back and get what they need from us regardless. So I think for us, it's been really important to double down on the message.
Great. You have another question?
Yeah, so this one was specifically for Scott, but I think Corri could probably have an idea on this too. How can service-related industries use social strategies to produce revenue? So hair salons, nail care, pet grooming, places that maybe can't necessarily transition to a carry-out curbside model.
Corri, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So there are a few different service-related companies in Charlotte that have created interesting campaigns. Kenna is doing at-home hair kits, which is great because they're also pairing that with video tutorials on how to use the kit. So to Scott's point, they're creating content that's useful, but then they're also making sales through the product that you use through their video tutorials. So that's a really great one. They're also lifting up their staff and their team members by putting them all on Venmo and posting on social that you can Venmo your favorite hairstylist. So it's sort of like a digital tip, if you will, without a service. So it's still keeping those people not necessarily afloat, but sending them some good vibes and a little bit of money along the way as we sort of weather out the storm. I also know of other salons that are taking deposits on future appointments. And so, you know, my friend Kenzie at Explicit Salon, she's taking deposits, and the people who make their deposits for their future appointments get the first appointments when they open. So it's sort of a win-win where you're just paying now for future services and you know that you're going to use the service, so why wouldn't you pay now? So just trying to figure out not necessarily how to totally pivot, but how to engage your people now and maybe get the funding you need to stay afloat, but promising them something in the future.
Yeah, that's all great. And to echo that, we all know that hair salons are probably going to be very busy. Everyone's in need of a haircut as soon as they open back up. So to Corri's point, gift cards I've seen very popular as well because, like she said, people are going to spend. So if there's a way that people can get, priority booking through spending now. And it's also for our clients, we've seen safety and convenience are two things that people really are, when they're looking to purchase, are really at the top of their mind. So that needs to come through if you're offering, free delivery or, no contact delivery kind of options for food or services. We have clients in the travel industry and sort of similar, while there's not a lot of interest right now in traveling, we know that there will be. So we're encouraging them to advertise kind of low risk areas, what activities and trips are going to be safe, and really trying to think about the marketing plan, not just as a fill-in, but how it will transition once things open back up as well.
Great. Do you want to ask another question? Go ahead.
Okay, well, one of the things the question that came up was around influencer marketing. What have you guys seen? How has this impacted influencer marketing? And is it a strategy, whether to the folks on the line who are small business owners or for Scott or Corri, how does a business go about deciding where to put, if they've got a small marketing budget, where do you put your marketing budget?
I can jump back in on this one a little bit. We've seen that the role of influencers has really grown during the pandemic. And I think it was Carrie's point earlier, it's really relevant to hear real stories from real people. It doesn't have to be perfectly produced content, just real and authentic. And we've seen influencers getting higher engagement than ever, mostly because they were the people that already kind of worked from home and were ready to produce content quickly and at scale for the brands they were working with. So I do think there's an opportunity for small businesses to work with what are called, if they can't afford the big budget, millions of follower influencer, there's micro influencers, people with about 1,000 to 10,000 followers, especially, if they're local in their market or niche industry, that can really help spread your message and get you ready to go back. You can find them by, people that are really already engaged with your brand, bloggers about your industry, or just look for hashtags, people that are talking about your industry and your brand, and kind of engage with people that you think would be good to work with.
This is James again. I'm a big proponent. I'm a big supporter of creating your own influence. It's tough. It's tough in the beginning, but creating the groundswell and building your voice is important, because if you always leverage other people's voice, I think the consumer will begin to question at some point who you actually are. So for me and for our team, in building several brand voices for several different boutique brands around the globe, and needing to create the voice that influencers want to speak for, it's very important to have your own voice and leverage your voice and the strength of your voice and bring influencers to you and not you go to them.
I would agree with that, and I would also challenge businesses to be super thoughtful about how they work with influencers. I think it's really great to work with them, but I think it's important to realize that they are a marketing distribution channel of the many that you already have, and so making sure that you are giving them sort of the message and direction, and you are owning that, and they are sort of the vessel, if you will. So, instead of just saying, hey, post about X or promote Y, like create a campaign around it and then work with influencers to disseminate that campaign so you still own it, and to James's point, it's your message, and they're just leveraging their audiences to get it out there.
So I got a question specific for Patrick. What kind of posts have gotten the most traction? You talked about a lot of different things that you were doing, from virtual wine tasting to updates on the hour or special offerings. What are you seeing the most traction with?
When we first rolled out delivery, we kind of try to be local, community, a little funny with it. So we decided to start with me making deliveries on my bike around town, and we took a picture of me loaded up with wine in my backpack and everything else, and that was our most liked post of all time by far, even more than when we opened up. So those kind of posts where it's just kind of like, look, we're all in this together. Here's what I'm doing to get you guys your wine. I'll ride my bike to your house and deliver it myself. Those kind of things have really generated a lot of traction. And then back to just more so than like the stage, nice, pretty pictures of wine and food, the pictures of people have really driven the most engagement. Whether it's our guy Harry, who's our wine buyer, and one of his, he's laying on a couch in front of 45 bottles of rosé or something like that. Those pictures people love just because they remember the people that they like to come visit, and then they're like, oh yeah, and they also sell wine. So it's not just this faceless wine organization that will give you alcohol. It's actually a couple people that live in the neighborhood, and we're all in this together. We're all struggling in our own ways, but it drives home the sense of community that I really want us to push, because we are members of the community. We live in the community. We work here, and we just have our own businesses as well.
Great. You got another one?
One of the questions I probably maybe for anybody really. For those small business owners, and you guys can probably relate to this, who are limited on time, don't necessarily have an agency they work with, don't necessarily have someone on their staff dedicated to digital or social marketing, any automation tools that you guys use to try to help manage the workflow, or any tips or tricks that you guys have kind of developed over the past couple of months to kind of help manage the various new tasks you guys have?
So we recommend using a really cost-effective tool for scheduling and maybe planning for social posts is Hootsuite. It's HOOTSUITE. It's very cost-effective. It's super easy. You can schedule content across your platforms. So if you're trying to make economical use of your time, sit down for an hour or two on Sunday afternoon and schedule and plan out all your posts for the week. Even further, if you are budget conscious, which I'm sure we all are, you can leverage graphic design tools like Canva, canva.com. I refer to it as Photoshop for Dummies because as much as I would love to know how to work the Adobe Suite, I'm not an expert, and Canva sort of helps me put things together in a cost-effective and also time-effective time, so you can create graphics that then you translate through scheduling to social.
Anyone else with some other platforms or tips and tricks that you've learned along the way?
I think that question is pretty difficult because when you're small, there isn't much automating. It's really just really tedious to keep yourself organized and pushing at it, because that's kind of what creates the machine that allows you to get bigger. That there's no easy way to that. There's no easy answer for that question. At least it's been my experience.
Related a little bit, Scott, can you talk a little bit more about Google Ads and search engine optimization for maybe groups that are just getting into this? What should they focus in on the short term? What should they know about that aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start off with what I kind of talked about earlier, with some free resources to businesses, especially for nonprofit businesses that are out there. If they don't already know about Google Nonprofit AdWords, basically it's a $10,000 grant per month that you can get as a nonprofit business to run ads there. It can be kind of intimidating to first jump into search ads. So what you really want to do is kind of do some research. There is some online tutorials that you can leverage and really find out. Excuse me, my dog's barking in the background. What kind of words people are searching for in your industry, and really help it be localized, especially for a lot of the small businesses in the area. Looking for what people in your area are searching about and what times they're searching can really help bring you to that first page of search results on Google.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Are there any local networks that small business owners can get looped into to, share best practices, share thoughts, kind of continue some of this dialogue that we have going on here today? It's I know if you're not familiar with this kind of conversation, it's a lot. So are there networks that have been established?
Or for me specifically, and maybe for James, Plaza Midwood Merchants is a really good one, just neighborhood related, that both the Hot Shop and the Bohemian are a part of. It's run by a guy named Clifton Castello and his wife, who own Moxie Mercantile, and they do a fantastic job of keeping everybody apprised of, especially in this time, different things as related to the Paycheck Protection Program or whatever kind of resources might be out there, new grants, new offerings that have recently popped up that maybe I didn't read about or something like that, or somebody could benefit from. So that's the only one that we are currently a part of. I'd like to hear about others.
Yeah, so I think if you get on Facebook and kind of Google around, there's a lot for specific industries. I know there's a specific one for wedding industries. I know there's a specific one for photography in Charlotte. And then we have the Girl Tribe community. Honestly, there's a ton of stuff that runs through there, but we've seen a ton of questions about how do entrepreneurs apply for unemployment, especially if you're self-employed. And there'll be around 40 to 50 comments on it. So that's one that you can apply to. Right now it's women only. And we kind of have a queue, but we're letting people in daily. So I'm trying to think if there's some other ones, but I would say industry specific, and then the Girl Tribe community.
And anybody looking for general social media education opportunities, I'm a member of Social Media Charlotte, and we run monthly educational topics. Now we're really going to be covering how to kind of what we're talking about today, switching tactics and navigating this pandemic. So they're great events, great networking opportunities across many industries in the Charlotte area.
And for us specifically, I'm sorry, this is James again. For us specifically, one of the community platforms that we built here locally in Charlotte is Be Social, through our Social Status Boutique in Plaza Midwood. And we do, we have shifted to doing our events digitally, and the events are based on tons of different topics. And I host events specifically every 2 weeks to give information just out to everyone who logs in about a number of different topics. And I leverage my relationships from people around our industry globally, and they join me on the call, and we just take about 2 to 3 hours to answer calls, primarily based on the topic, but we go off topic to answer specific questions if people have questions. Our next free game session is this upcoming Thursday.
So let me stay a little bit in the same kind of area. Is there anything that the city should be doing? We've talked a lot about grant programs or things like that, but are there initiatives that the city, from your perspectives, that the city can do to really help support small businesses?
I could jump in. I think as it applies to the minority community, I think there could be a bigger platform built for people of color around Charlotte. I don't know. In our reason for starting me specifically doing free game through our Be Social program is so the people of color in Charlotte can see other entrepreneurs of color, not just in business, but doing all different kinds of careers, and give them some level of mentorship or direction and guidance, a place where they can find those things. Because for my 15 years navigating being an entrepreneur here, it was tough for me to find outside of very buttoned up organizations like the Black Business Chamber of Commerce. But what we try to offer is something that's a little more tailored to the younger kid. And I don't know, it would be amazing to have the city support on more things like that.
That's awesome. I agree with that for sure. I also think it would be really lovely, creating platforms like this where you're essentially creating content by just being together and having a conversation. So any other storytelling that you can do that promotes small businesses would be really helpful, just to promote different businesses in different neighborhoods and different areas that are doing something cool and unique, and putting them together, whether it's through listicles or blog content or podcasts or stuff like this. Creating content and telling their stories, I think, could be really valuable.
That's very good. Creators in general need a platform in Charlotte. I think Plaza Midwood in certain areas of Charlotte, Plaza Midwood, NoDa, these communities have kind of developed on their own. And I think the city's done a good job of coming in and helping build infrastructure around them, but not really helping form what they are, and helping people who are looking for them discover them. So just supporting creatives in and around Charlotte, and non-traditional entrepreneurs, like outside of real estate development and those things, that's something that's also I see a void in.
As we kind of head into the home stretch here, I want to turn a little bit towards kind of where Royal we go from here. So I'd be curious to hear from all of you. We kind of go around. As you guys think about reopening, although none of you guys have closed, but as kind of whatever that new normal is, kind of getting back to that. What are your concerns, and also, how are you guys thinking about using the digital social strategies that have been working now? How do you begin to convert those to whatever our new normal is as we start to think maybe weeks and months into the future?
For us, this is James again. I look at it as all opportunity. Obviously, there's going to be a slower pace with people coming through the door, just because I think everyone's going to be a little nervous coming out at first. But I think it's an opportunity for us to take the time with each customer that comes in and speak to them about our experiences and what we do as a brand, if that makes sense. And digitally, it's going to be great because now we've had the time to look at how we can expand our brand message through our digital platforms, not just Instagram and Twitter, but through our web, so we can connect with people who can't make it to Plaza Midwood or aren't necessarily comfortable making it out yet, or who have family members that have health issues that would make it difficult for a person to go out because they won't want to jeopardize them, if that makes sense.
So toss it to Carrie along the similar line. What are you thinking about in the coming weeks and months, and how are you thinking about transitioning your strategies now, or where's your thoughts on how things move forward?
Yeah, I think it's currently up for discussion. I think everyone thinks phase one's going to happen May 9th, and maybe there's going to be people rushing. Maybe there's people taking their time, and I think we're just continuing to have internal discussions on exactly what James was saying is like, of course, like it's going to be half capacity. We have a 900 square foot store, so I think that means we can have 5 people in there. We're probably going to need 2 employees. That means that's 3 customers. They're trying on clothes. They're looking at clothes. Like the conversion rate is going to be low. And so how can we really create an experience for those few customers that are coming in, make them feel safe? How can we have fun with it? Like we're talking about, if you have to be 6 feet away, do we put, pink hearts 6 foot away or something? Like, how can you take the opportunity that's presented and like really dig your brand into that? And then also we've completely pivoted and we've seen success in it, and how do we keep that going while adding this new normal back into it where we're speaking to the customer in person? Even from an event standpoint, that's a whole nother conversation. And how do we slowly pivot that too? We keep, like there's no answer right now because we don't know how big of a group you can be in and when that will ever happen. So I think we're just keeping our ears and eyes out, what other businesses are doing. And like James said, like, how can you take it as an opportunity, not looking at it negatively, but like to really infuse your brand and to make your customer love you even more.
Corri, what do you guys hear? What is your group hearing from your customers and your clients in terms of their concerns in the coming months and weeks?
I think their biggest concern is that there's a lack of guidance and availability on like what the new regulations are going to be as it relates to, like Carrie said, limited occupancy and, how not being able to have full capacity of guests in your restaurant or clients in your store. And so I think everyone's just sort of treading water as they move forward toward like opening whenever they choose to open, but there's not a lot of clarity around how they can do that, like how from a tactical, logistical, standpoint that they can make a plan, So I would say that's the biggest concern is just there's a lot of question marks and a lot of unknowns. And we've already been through like the most traumatic experience and then we're just stuck, not knowing how to move forward or when to move forward or what it looks like. And so I would say that's like the biggest concern is just a lot of unknown and lack of information.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think small businesses across the board are going to need guidance on what to do. And honestly, access to PPE, like, okay, everybody has to wash their hands with sanitizer. Well, how are we going to get that? And okay, everybody needs masks, and of course they're more readily available. But I think there's going to be an access problem from smaller businesses and not knowing where to get the things to make their customers feel safe. But like, what's the standard? Like we have a whole Google Doc on our end, and we're trying to call it the Girl Tribe Standard, but what even does that mean? And so working through that and maybe having some guidance would be a huge help, I think, to businesses across the board. Honestly, I think that's probably like the biggest priority other than grants is giving businesses some guidelines on how to reopen.
Well, I want to thank everybody so much as we're coming to a close of today's mentorship series. Your creativity is truly inspiring. Either how you're helping businesses or you yourselves are pivoting. It's really great to hear from all of you, and thank you. We recognize that everybody is very busy, and so we really thank you for taking the time to do this with us today. We are going to continue these mentorship series every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we'll be back next week with one on exactly what we were just talking about, best practices on reopening. So we will have that one up next week at Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So thank you again, everybody.